What sort of rebuild does Ten Hag need at Manchester United? Why United should copy this European side's transfer strategy? And what can Ten Hag and Manchester United learn from Pep Guardiola and Manchester City? All of that will be coming up in this video. But before I go any further, would you be interested in watching one live Italian Serie A game each weekend? Well, if you are in the UK or Ireland, you can do exactly this by downloading the OneFootball app. This weekend it's Inter Milan versus Sampdoria at 7:45 on the OneFootball app. And if you're like me, you'll probably be interested in other leagues as well, so you can use a OneFootball app to look at stats, transfers, results and highlights from other leagues as well. So the OneFootball app has everything you need as a football fan. So if you do want to download the app and get all of that, a link will be left in the description below. And by downloading the app, you will be helping to support the channel. So you've probably heard the phrase a manager is only as good as the players on the pitch, and this is somewhat true, but obviously lacks nuance. But certainly at the top level, whilst managers do make a huge difference to a side's fortunes, simply having better quality players in your side gives you a massive advantage, and is usually the difference between winning the title or Champions League and finishing second or third and getting knocked out in the quarterfinals. And so pretty logically, in order for Ten Hag's Manchester United to compete domestically as well as in Europe, the individual quality of the players in the squad has to increase dramatically. And that's where squad building comes into play. See, money makes a difference, but how you spend the money makes a bigger difference. United and City have spent a similar amount of money on transfer fees and wages since Sir Alex Ferguson left, but City have had multiple factors more success than United, and to me it's pretty obvious why. City have been better at squad building than United have. See, squad building isn't just about signing the best players available in each position, it's also about signing players who fit the system and the style of the side, can also help to get the best out of the players around them, and have the potential to improve and become elite, whilst also not costing so much that it depletes your funds for other positions. Another important and mostly overlooked element of squad building is knowing when to move players on, and this is something that Sir Alex Ferguson was a master at throughout his tenure. But before we go any further, let's analyse this Manchester United squad, not just for the here and now but also for the future. So out of everyone in the squad, these are the players I think should be in the starting positions for the foreseeable future, with me specifically targeting around the 2024-25 season, as I think that would have given Ten Hag two solid summer transfer windows as well as the winter transfer windows as well to fully revamp this side and get it to the level needed in order to compete. Lisandro Martinez is obviously a starter, showing his worth already, suiting Ten Hag's style exactly, and being just 24 years old. And so considering centre-backs usually peak around 29-30, the Argentine is definitely a player I would earmark as a future world-class centre-back, despite being 3'5" in height, or around that I think. So Varane is an iffy one, whilst he is still just 29 and should have another 4 or 5 years left at the top. His injury record and susceptibility to hit a rapid decline, as he did towards the back end of his Real Madrid tenure and midway through his time at United, does make me question whether he is the long-term answer at centre-back. I do still think he can improve as he moves into his 30s, but United still need a very good backup anyway, given Varane's injury history. Dalot and Malacia are two players United should be keeping hold of. However, United should be looking to upgrade both, firstly to improve the starting 11, but also in order to create squad depth and bring in competition for positions as well. Casemiro, despite being 30, is a player who I see playing into his mid-30s, so I think even in a couple of seasons' time, he'll still be a focal point of the side, as will Bruno Fernandes ahead of him, with Rashford, Sancho and Antony in the wide positions as well. But the critical areas that do need improving are at goalkeeper, in the creative central midfield role and up front, with areas like the two fullback positions, a third centre-back, and maybe even another central midfielder or a wide player also being needed within the next 2 seasons or so. I will come on to the exact players that I would be targeting for Ten Hag in a different video, which when it is out will be linked in the description below. If not, subscribe to the channel and click the bell so you do get notified when that does come out. But let's now look at a great example of how squad building should be done. So from 2013-14 all the way up until 2019-20, AC Milan did not finish in the top 4 in Serie A, finishing as low as 10th in 14-15. However, they would go on to finish second in 2021 and won the Scudetto last season under Stefano Pioli. However, the foundations for this drastic transformation came in the transfer windows of 2019 and 2020. Prior to 2019, Milan's squad for the previous few seasons, really since Allegri left the club in 2013, had been filled with ageing and mediocre players. players, who were long past their best, including players like Ricardo Rodriguez, Timu Bakayoko, Giancampo Bonaventura and Lucas Biglia, to name a few, whilst not really having any young talents with high potential. But in the summer of 2019, Paolo Maldini would return to the club under the new ownership of the Elliott Management Corporation, who had taken ownership of Milan the season before. And alongside Paolo Maldini as director of football, they would set out a radically different transfer policy. Throughout the late 2000s to early 2010s, Milan was a club known for signing former top-level talents that were past their peak and on the decline, with players like Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, David Beckham and Robinho all coming to mind, mixed with a random collection of high-profile names like Kevin Prince Boateng, Sully Montari, Kensuke Honda and Nigel de Jong. But under Maldini's guidance, Milan would start to bring in younger players in their early 20s, who had the potential to become top-level players but hadn't yet developed into the players that they could be. Frank Kessie, Rafael Leao, Theo Hernandez, Benacer and Krunic all came in with Milan spending a net of £57 million in the summer of 2019. The summer after, Sandro Tonali, Brahim Diaz and Fikayo Tomori were brought in, first on loan with all signing permanently the summer after, a clear and shrewd try before you buy transfer strategy by Milan. Ante Rebic, Simon Kjaer and Kalulu all came in for less than £10 million in total. Mike Maignan, Olivier Giroud, Junior Messias and Yacine Adili all arrived in the summer of 2021. But Milan did also lose players as well, with Lucas Paqueta and Andre Silva leaving, but not in a good way, which would be them overperforming and going on to bigger clubs, but because they had underperformed and were deemed dispensable by Milan, which on the one hand maybe shows Milan to not always be the greatest developer of players once they are signed, but they still had the vision and belief to bring in these two who are now showing to be quality European level players despite not succeeding in red and black. Milan signed players between the ages of 20 to 24 who were just a season or so from transforming into top level players, just needing regular game time, and that risk paid off. Rafael Leao is now producing world-class output in the short term, and if he can sustain this, he'll move into that world-class bracket permanently, or at least as long as he maintains that level. The same goes for Ismail Benacer, Fikayo Tomori and Mike Maignan, with Theo Hernandez already being a player who I would put in the world-class category. And they've had success with it almost immediately, going from 6th to competing for the title and then eventually winning Serie A last season. And just from hearing that, I think it's very hard to not advocate this transfer strategy for Manchester United. And it's the one that I personally would go with if I was the director of football at United. I think if Manchester United in the summer were following AC Milan's model, rather than signing Antony and Casemiro for a combined £140 to £150 million, they would have instead signed players like Van der Sar, Monaco's right back, for around £30 to £40 million, Maxime Kakare, who at the start of the window would have probably been available for between £20 and £25 million, given that he had just 1 year left on his contract, Cody Gakpo for maybe £40 to £50, and maybe someone like Ibrahim Sangare for around the £40 million mark as well. And along with the signings of Malacia, Eriksen and Lisandro Martinez, I would say that these Milan-inspired theoretical signings would be twice as good as a transfer window that United had. And this may sound extreme, as both Antony and Casemiro are without doubt fantastic signings and have both majorly improved United already, but once I break it down I think it will make a little bit more sense. The reason I say this is that how good your transfer strategy is in a given transfer window has to be graded against what could have been done realistically for the same amount of financial net spend, both in terms of fees and wage packages, not just for this season but also for the foreseeable future as well, of whatever project you are trying to build and the phase of that project that the squad and the club are in. So for example, the reason I think signing Sangare over Casemiro would have been a better move, even though I still do like the Casemiro transfer, is because the transfer spend would likely be 2/3 of Casemiro's and his wage package probably 3 times less as well. Factor in that Sangare is 6 years younger and still in his development phase, and so he'll begin to get even better than he currently is. The lower financial outlay would have also allowed United to bring in someone like Maxime Kakare, who is a perfect blend of Christian Eriksen and Sangare, having the press resistance and the progressive passing to play in that Verratti-esque deeper line playmaker role in possession, but also being defensively secure enough to play in a midfield double pivot in big games, and in my opinion would have been a significant improvement on Eriksen from a pure defensive point of view, whilst also being able to fulfil his creative responsibilities whilst in possession. And so I think that for this season, Sangare and Kakare from a tactical point of view, as well as looking for the optimal blend of abilities, is a better midfield two than Eriksen and Casemiro, mostly because of the significant defensive improvement that Kakare would bring, and because you're not giving all your money to Real Madrid and Casemiro, you can still bring in Christian Eriksen as an alternative central midfield option, and an excellent option off the bench. But before I go on, I do now have a clips channel where I will be uploading shorter content from my previous videos, and I'll even release some clips of some future videos that should be coming out soon. So subscribe to the channel, it will be linked in the description, and follow my Instagram and Twitter for more content as well. Those will all be linked in the description below. If given the option, I'd rather have Sangare, Kakare and Eriksen than just Casemiro and Eriksen. Not just from a short-term point of view, but you also have to factor in the long-term, with Kakare and Sangare still having their peak to come, whilst Casemiro and Eriksen are firmly in the twilight of their careers, and realistically United will need to be thinking about replacing both within the next 3 to 4 years, which is something that Milan don't have to worry about, given that the majority of their key players are still only between 23 and 27, which means when Milan sign a player is to improve and add squad depth rather than to fully replace players, as they have less key players moving into that decline stage as they approach the latter years of their careers. And this is definitely an element that has to be added to United's transfer strategy, as we've seen with Barcelona and Juventus over the past decade, as both sides towards the mid to the end of the 2010s seem to focus their transfer strategy on bringing in players in their late 20s, early 30s, with Juventus doing this via free transfers like Sami Khedira, Blaise Matuidi and Aaron Ramsey, and Barcelona doing this with the additions of Vidal, Pjanic and Griezmann, and this is something that United must avoid, as whilst it is certainly fine, if not preferable, to have older, more experienced players in your squad, if you do have too many or are too reliant on these players, when they do begin to decline, they will tend to decline all around the same period, significantly reducing the overall quality of the squad within a matter of years or so. This is what Manchester United have to avoid, and at the moment there is young players to offset the older key players like Casemiro, Eriksen, Varane and Ronaldo. But for United's future transfer strategy over the next few years, I do think they also have to take a leaf out of Pep and Manchester City's book. What I mean by this is that City have spent a lot of money on their squad building. However, apart from a few signings like Grealish and Diaz, City tend to get pretty good value for their signings, tending to prefer to sign players around the 40 to 60 million pound mark rather than the 60 to 80 million pound mark like United do. When Pep took over in 2016-2017, it was a bit of an intermediate season, with new signings like Claudio Bravo and Nolito failing to impress, and Pep being forced to utilise players like Alexander Kolarov, Zabaleta, Otamendi, Fabian Delph, Gal Clichy and Yaya Toure, who really didn't suit Pep's style of play or the role they were being asked to perform. City finished third that season, but in the summer of 2017 they had one of the all-time great transfer windows, which crucially set City up not just for the short term in that season, but also for the next 4 to 5, even 6 and 7 seasons ahead. They signed Ederson, Bernardo Silva and Kyle Walker in the summer for a combined £130 million. Mendy for £50 million and Danilo for £27 were also added, as was Laporte, who was brought in for around £50 million in January of 2018. So City had essentially signed 4 to 5 starting players, and Laporte, Ederson, Walker and Bernardo Silva would all go on to be not just crucial players for that season, but also key players behind City's success for the next 4 years, showing how good a transfer window it was. Signing premium transfer targets who are under the age of 27 sets you up for the next 4 to 5 seasons. So if every signing you make is geared with the vision of being a premium, more expensive talent but is still not yet in their prime, you are going to improve the side rapidly within a couple of transfer windows, and that's why even though Manchester City spent big amounts in the last few seasons with Erling Haaland, Jack Grealish, Riyad Mahrez, Ruben Diaz, Rodri and Cancelo, all perfect examples of City spending big on individual signings but rarely wasting a signing. Every signing made, specifically the expensive ones, seem to have a well-defined role, and within 2 seasons of being at the club they are usually perfectly adapted to Pep's style of play. This means that season on season City are improving the individual ability in the squad, and so if you limit your transfers to only signing top level players, and you sign say 3 a season, after 2 to 3, maybe 4 years, if all your signings are under the age of 27, you now have a team full of top level players all approaching their peak at the same time. By taking inspiration from Pep and City, what United would do is, rather than signing so-called filler players who aren't ever going to develop into top level players like Van der Beek, Telles, Wan-Bissaka and Fred, they would instead target players like Anthony, Sancho and Bruno Fernandes, who were all players who even before they signed with United, you could see they had that top level potential and were young enough where a sizable fee becomes a lot more palatable once you factor in the years ahead that you have with them. Following this, I think United should set out 7 or 8 areas where they do need to improve, both in the starting 11 positions as well as the 7 to 9 regular substitutions and backups, and then look to get premium targets in each of those positions. Now in another video I will be going through each of these 7 to 8 players I think United should target over the next 2 summer transfer windows in order to try to replicate how Pep built this City squad. That video will be linked in the description once it's out. But put your thoughts on the transfer strategy that United should follow in the comments section. Check out some of my other videos linked below in the description as well, and subscribe to the channel